Good morning and welcome to an all-new episode of Mystery, Murder, and Magic. It's a brand new week and a brand new month starts this week too. Soon the little kids are going to be counting down to when Santa comes for a visit. I'm counting down the last weeks of being in my 40s. Before you know it, it's going to be an all-new year. Now, Saturday night, the boys and I rode over to Union to see the Seymour's lights on Lover's Lane. If you've never been, you're really missing a treat. It's free to ride through, but they do appreciate donations. But sorry, it's early, y'all. Mr. Seymour told me that this is their last year of doing this drive-through of the lights because he's done it for 33 years and he'd like to just rest. And I can imagine with the amount of lights and decorations that they have out there, what it takes to maintain all that. He said they're still going to do a drive-by type thing, like where you can just like drive by the house and the yard to see the lights from the road, but they're not going to do the drive-through anymore. But it's kind of heartbreaking. I mean, and I can totally understand his reasons. But that's just a tradition around here, is to ride through the Seymour's yard looking at their lights. And they've been doing it since I was 16 years old, so it's a big part of my life. But it's amazing that they've been doing it for so long. But y'all, the lights are so pretty, and if you have a chance, take a drive over there. You can put Lover's Lane, Union, South Carolina in your map app, and it'll take you there. Or if you're familiar with that area, you can turn by the Energy Mart. It used to be A&M's or something like that. But you turn right there onto Sardis Road, and you drive about a quarter of a mile, and then you take a right onto Lover's Lane. Now, you'll keep going straight on Lover's Lane, and eventually you'll know it when you get to it because tons of lights, and you turn it right into their driveway. But I should also tell you that if you do use your map app, it's going to tell you probably to turn off of Lover's Lane at some point, because mine did. I don't know why. But don't turn off of it. You just stay on Lover's Lane. Keep going straight. All right. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and say that the 1980s were my most favorite decade that I've lived through. I mean, what's not to like? We had the best music back then. We had parachute pants, Swatch watches, phrases like gag me with a spoon, the NES game system, and big hair. We didn't have smartphones or the internet, but we didn't need any of that, and we didn't know about any of that. So, we were just fine. Now, I think I've said it before, but you know how people are always saying things have gotten bad or the internet is an evil thing? Well, the 80s proved that things were already bad and there was already plenty of evil out there, and we didn't need the internet for it. Well, starting today through the end of December, we're going to be talking about some very infamous crimes that took place back in the 1980s. And we're starting it off today with the kidnapping and murder of Adam Walsh. Mystery, Murder, and Magic proudly presents Totally 80s. And here's your totally rad host, Andrea Lee. All right. So, on the afternoon of July the 27th, 1981, a mother and her son drove to a mall in Hollywood, Florida. They're there to do a little shopping. The 6-year-old son, Adam, he sees a group of older boys playing a video game. So his mom, Reve, agrees to let him watch the boys while she shops for a lamp nearby. When she returns about 10 minutes later, little Adam is nowhere to be found. I can only imagine the horror she felt as she searched all over that Sears store for her little boy. Now, one of the store clerks called his name over the PA system, but there was no response. After an hour and a half of searching, the police were called in to investigate. And during the initial stage of the investigation, security guard at the mall told investigators that he had ran off the boys playing the video games because they were causing trouble. Apparently, a scuffle had broken out over the video games because they were fighting basically over who would be, whose turn it was next. When the security guard asked the boys if their parents were there at the mall, the older boy said no, so he made them leave through the west entrance. Well, Adam was a shy little boy, and he may have been too timid to tell the security guard that his mom was shopping close by. So it's possible that he had followed one of the boys out of the store. At that point, his parents believed that he was left on his own. But no matter what happened after that point, that the security guard made the older boys leave, one thing was certain. Adam Walsh had disappeared without a trace. Soon the news outlets were flooding the air with the news of a missing boy from Florida. At that time, I had cousins live in that very area that Adam was missing from. No one knew if Adam's kidnapper, or even if there was a kidnapper at that point, would strike again. My grandparents were frantic because of that. And who knew if there would be more kids going missing? And were my cousins safe? I was 9 years old when this happened, and it's really the first kidnapping or missing kid case that I can remember hearing about. In the hours and days that followed, Adam's parents, Reve and John Walsh, launched a massive search. Helicopters searched from the sky while many people searched on foot. The Walshes even went on Good Morning America pleading for help. But no matter how and where they searched, they weren't finding anything, not even the smallest trace of Adam. There was no leads, no tips, or anything. But sadly, all of that changed on August the 10th. 16 days after Adam went missing from that Sears store, two fishermen found the severed head of little Adam floating in a canal off the Florida Turnpike. That canal was about 130 miles from Hollywood. The following morning, the Walshes appeared on national TV again, saying that they had faith that their child was still alive. Let's listen.
They have found the remains of a young person in Florida that at this time they are trying to identify whether it is Adam or not. At this point, they feel that it is good possibility it is not Adam. Therefore, they felt we should come on and carry the word of Adam to the public because there is a good likelihood that he is still out there with his abductors.
But shortly after that, a positive ID was made on the head, and the official cause of death was asphyxiation. It's not the way they wanted this investigation to end at all. And now it becomes a murder investigation. And the main priority is finding out who could have did this to a precious, innocent little boy. And all of this happened in the middle of the day. I think that's the thing that's so disturbing. It was broad daylight. And it was literally just across the street from the police department there in Hollywood. Now, during the investigation, police learned that Edward James, a man who had been arrested for abducting another little boy in Florida, could have been in the area during the time that Adam went missing. As a matter of fact, James had even admitted to a cellmate that he had kidnapped and murdered Adam, and he felt confident that police would never find blood in his car. While checking out that lead, it was learned by police that James had been away from his apartment complex that he lived in for 2 consecutive weeks, and on August 27, 1981, he had a new seat cover installed by an upholstery shop. When police interviewed James, he denied the allegations, and that recorded interview was analyzed by a computer program. It showed no signs of deception. Based on that and a lack of evidence, James was no longer a person of interest in the case. A family friend of the Walshes, a man named James Campbell, was also considered a person of interest, but after he passed 2 polygraph tests and underwent hypnosis, he was cleared of any suspicion. Another person who was questioned in the disappearance and murder of Adam was Jeffrey Dahmer. In 1991, Dahmer's father called America's Most Wanted their hotline, and that was a show by John Walsh, or hosted by John Walsh. And he said that he believed his son was a pedophile. Now, Dahmer was already in prison in Wisconsin, but he was in fact staying at a hotel in nearby Miami Beach at the time of the abduction, and two witnesses even placed him at the mall that day. And one of those witnesses went on to say that they had even seen Dahmer throw a little boy into a blue van. Well, it was found out that Dahmer worked at a delivery shop at that time, and that shop had a blue delivery van. When Dahmer was questioned in 1992 about Adam's death, he told authorities, quote, "I've told you everything, how I killed him, how I cooked them, and who I ate. Why wouldn't I tell you if I did it to someone else?" He also went on to say that he wasn't a pedophile. Now, Adam's dad later said that there wasn't any evidence linking his child's abduction and murder to those that Dahmer had committed. Adam's parents were also interrogated and given polygraph tests, but they were also cleared. And at that point, it looked like the police were running out of suspects. But in 1983, there was a new break in the case. While he was already incarcerated for 2 other murders, a man by the name of Otis Toole confessed to the 1981 murder of Adam Walsh. Toole told authorities that he had lured Adam into his car with promises of candy and toys. And the little boy seemed to go along with it at first, but as Toole drove north, Adam began to panic. And once he started panicking, Toole says he punched him in the face, which only made the situation worse, so he hit him hard enough to knock him out. While the little boy was unconscious, Toole drove him in the car to a deserted service road off of the Florida Turnpike. Once he was there, he realized Adam was still breathing, so he took him out of the car and decapitated him with a machete. He says that later he burned the rest of Adam's remains in a refrigerator when he was back in Jacksonville. Blood was found in Toole's car, but it couldn't be identified. You have to remember that in the 80s, the DNA technology and forensics in general just weren't as sophisticated as they are now. Well, you would think that maybe now they could retest, but get this, the police literally lost the bloodstained carpet from the car, the machete that Toole says he decapitated Adam with, and the car itself. I mean, how the hell do you even lose critical evidence like this? I mean, it's a whole damn car was just misplaced. Now, several times Toole would recount and then confess to the crime again. And in one confession, he even fingered Henry Lee Lucas as an accomplice, but it was found that Lucas had been in a Virginia prison at the time of Adam's kidnapping and murder. Now, Toole was never officially charged with Adam's murder, even though he provided a lot of details into the crime. And at one point, he even drove with law enforcement to different places where parts of the crime were committed. He pointed out where he had decapitated the boy, and where he says he burned the rest of the remains. But to this day, those remains have never been located. Toole passed away at the age of 49 while still in prison from cirrhosis. Later, a niece of Toole's told John Walsh that Toole had confessed to the abduction and murder of Adam, But at the time, authorities didn't take that confession seriously because he had confessed before and then took it back, and he had confessed to hundreds of other murders as well. In 1997, John Walsh released his book called Tears of Rage, and at that time, there was a new police chief at the Florida Police Department. Rick Stone had been the chief there for about a year before the book was published. He had 22 years of experience, or law enforcement experience, and had previously worked with the Dallas, Texas, and Wichita, Kansas police departments. After that book was released, Stone dove headfirst into the case and went through it with a fine-tooth comb. After listening to recorded interviews with Toole, analyzing evidence, and I'm sure doing a lot of critical thinking through the process, his review found evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that Toole had in fact murdered Adam Walsh. But it wouldn't be until December 16, 2008 that the case would be officially closed. Hollywood Police Chief Chad Wagner, along with John Walsh, made the announcement that the case was officially closed. And because it was evidence, the decapitated head of Adam Walsh had remained in the morgue until 2008. Now, I want to go back in time for just a bit at this point. In 1983, the made-for-TV movie Adam debuted. It was shown again in 1984 and 1985. At the end of each airing, pictures of missing kids were shown with a phone number to call if you had any information on any of those kids. 12 of the 55 that were shown over that time period were found thanks to their pictures being shown. One of those kids found was a rapper we know as Busy Bone. His real name is Brian Anthony McCain II, and he's the youngest member of Bone Thugs and Harmony. He had been abducted by his stepfather, but when his picture came up at the end of that movie, a neighbor recognized him and called authorities. McCain was soon reunited with his mom. Adam's legacy doesn't end there either. Over the years, the Walsh family has worked very hard with lawmakers and the TV industry. In 1984, the U.S. Congress passed what is known as the Missing Children's Assistance Act. This act would provide this leadership by authorizing the administrator of the Office of Juvenile Justice to make grants and enter into contracts to assist state, local, and individual entities working to locate and return missing children. And from this, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was formed. Also created in Adam's memory was the Code Adam program. Code Adam provides businesses, parks, government buildings, and other establishments steps to take if a child is reported missing within those premises so that valuable time isn't lost. As we know, time is very critical in missing persons cases. At least one of Adam's siblings has also taken it on to keep children safe too. In 2006, President George W. Bush signed into law the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act. It created a national database of convicted child molesters and increases penalties for sexual and violent offenses against children. Over the years since Adam's death, John Walsh has hosted many television shows dedicated to solving crimes and catching the criminals who committed them. I have to say that I admire John and Reve Walsh. When their son was kidnapped and murdered, they could have just wallowed in their sorrow. They chose to make something positive out of something very horrible in hopes that no other family would have to go through what they had went through. That's all I have today. Be sure to tune in again on Wednesday morning for the Midweek Mini. Have a great week.